10 years of marriage and still no child. So what exactly are you doing in this house? You are completely useless. God is not finished with me.
What would you do if the very people who laughed at your pain were the ones destroyed by their own pride? This is not just a story. This is the kind of thing that happens in real families, in real compounds, in real African homes. Read carefully, because by the end, you will never look at humiliation the same way again. The insult came on a Sunday. It always came on a Sunday. Chioma was standing near the kitchen window, still wearing her church dress, still smelling of the morning service, when she heard Patricia's voice cutting through the compound like a machete through dry grass. That woman has been married for 10 years and her womb is still as empty as a broken pot. My brother deserves better. Chioma did not move. She held the pot of soup she was stirring and stared at the wall in front of her. She had trained herself not to cry in the kitchen. The kitchen was where she was strong. The bedroom, that was a different story. Patricia was her husband Daniel's cousin, rich, loud, and sharp-tongued in a way that people called bold when they liked you and wicked when they did not. Patricia had married into the Okafo family in Lagos, a family with 2 cars, 3 plots of land, and enough pride to fill a stadium. She visited every few months, and every visit left Chioma with fresh wounds she had to hide under her smile. Daniel was a quiet man, a good man, or at least he used to be. He worked as a supervisor at a packaging company in Enugu. He had married Chioma because he loved her. He had told her that on their wedding night, standing under a ceiling fan that barely worked, holding both her hands like she was something precious. That was 10 years ago. Now he sat at the dinner table and barely looked at her. "Patricia," Chioma said, walking into the kitchen like she owned it, her wrapper tied high on her chest and her phone in her hand. "Did you hear me talking outside?" "I was cooking," Chioma said calmly. "Cooking," Patricia laughed, a short, dry laugh. "That is all you know how to do. Cook and clean, and go to church, and pray to a God who has clearly not answered you." She paused for effect. "My sons came first in their exams this term, both of them. Did Daniel tell you? First and second in their whole school. That is what a real woman produces. Results, not just pepper soup." Chioma turned and looked at her directly. "Patricia," she said quietly, "God sees everything." Patricia hissed and walked away. That night, Chioma locked the bathroom door and sat on the cold tile floor and cried until her chest hurt. She had been doing this for years, crying in places where no one could hear her. The bathroom, the backyard at midnight, the church balcony on weekday mornings when the building was empty. She was 34 years old. She had done every test. She had taken every medicine. She had visited 3 hospitals and 1 prayer house and 2 herbalists she will never tell her pastor about. Every result said the same thing in different languages. Nothing is wrong with you, just wait. But the community did not want to wait. The mother-in-law, Mama Daniel, a stout woman from Imo State, who wore her displeasure on her face like a permanent wrapper, had stopped greeting Chioma warmly 2 years into the marriage. Now she greeted her like you greet a piece of furniture, politely, briefly, without feeling. A woman who cannot give a man children is like a farm that cannot give crops, Mama Daniel had said once in a family meeting, not even looking in Chioma's direction. What is the point of watering a dry ground? The room had gone quiet. Daniel had said nothing. That silence was the loudest thing Chioma had ever heard. But she stayed. She stayed because she believed. She stayed because somewhere deep inside her, beneath all the pain and all the shame and all the years of being called barren and empty and dry, there was a small, stubborn fire that refused to go out. She did not know that fire was about to become a flame that would change everything. 6 months after Patricia's visit, Daniel sat Chioma down at the dining table on a Tuesday evening. He was not rough about it. He was not cruel. That was almost worse, because cruelty she could fight. But this quiet, tired sadness in his eyes was something she did not know how to battle. "Chioma," he said, his hands flat on the table, "I need us to talk." She already knew what the conversation was about. She had known it was coming the way you know rain is coming. Not because you can see it yet, but because the air changes. The birds go quiet. Everything holds its breath. Patricia has been talking to me, Daniel continued. Of course she had. She says I need to think about the future, about who will carry my name, about what happens when I am old and there is nobody. Daniel, Chioma's voice was steady. She was proud of how steady it was. Are you telling me you want another wife? He did not answer immediately. That was her answer. She stood up slowly, pushed her chair back, and walked to the bedroom. She did not slam the door. She closed it quietly, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at her own hands in her lap. The next morning, Patricia arrived again, this time with a woman in tow. A younger woman, round face, shy smile, a yellow blouse that looked expensive. Her name, Chioma would later learn, was Blessing, 26 years old. Patricia had found her from somewhere in Anambra, the daughter of a man who owed Patricia's husband a favor. I am just bringing her to visit, Patricia said at breakfast, her voice sweet as spoiled fruit. Nobody is forcing anything. We are just looking at options. That is what reasonable people do. Chioma sat at the table and served everyone food. Her hands did not shake, her face did not crack. She had become very good at this, wearing her dignity like armor, even when it was heavy. But later, in the backyard, Mama Daniel pulled Chioma aside and spoke to her in Igbo, low and direct. You are a good woman, Mama Daniel said. And for a moment, just a moment, Chioma thought she saw something human in the old woman's eyes. But good is not enough. My son needs children. If you cannot give them, step aside and let someone who can. Mama, Chioma said, in Igbo also, I am still here. I have not left. I will not leave. And I am asking you, I am begging you, give me a little more time. Mama Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then she sucked her teeth softly and walked away. That night, Patricia held court in the living room, talking about her sons, Kevin and Brian, with the satisfaction of a woman who had won a competition nobody else knew they were in. Kevin just got promoted at the warehouse where he works. He is only 24 and already a floor manager. And Brian is handling the company's petty cash now. They trusted him with money. My sons, my 2 sons. She looked at Chioma with a smile that was not a smile. That is legacy. That is what a woman leaves behind. Not prayers, not church vigils, sons. Chioma smiled. You must be very proud, she said. Patricia looked mildly disappointed that she had not drawn blood. That night, alone in the bedroom, while Daniel slept on the other side of the bed like a stranger, Chioma made a decision. She would stop fighting the people around her. She would stop trying to prove herself to Mama Daniel and Patricia and the aunties who whispered and the neighbors who counted her childless years like beads on an abacus. She would simply give it all to God, completely, fully, with both hands, and wait. She did not know how little time she had left to wait. If you have ever watched someone receive something they had almost stopped believing in, you know that joy and shock can wear the same face. 3 months after Chioma made her quiet surrender to God, she began to feel strange. Not sick strange, different strange. A warmth she could not explain, a tiredness that was not the tired of sadness, but the tired of something growing. She ignored it for 2 weeks because she had been disappointed before. Her body had tricked her or she had tricked herself, and the crushing return of reality was a kind of death she had stopped volunteering for. But the feeling did not go away. She went to the clinic alone on a Wednesday morning wearing a plain blue dress and her old flat sandals. She told no one. She sat in the waiting room between a pregnant teenager and an old man with a cough, and she filled out the form with the calm of someone who had learned to manage hope like a controlled fire. Enough to keep warm, not enough to burn down the house. When the nurse called her name and handed her the result, Chioma read it standing up. Positive. She read it again. Positive. She sat down. Then she stood up. Then she sat down again. "Are you okay, madam?" the nurse asked. Chioma could not speak for a full 30 seconds. Then she said very quietly, "Can you check again, please?" They checked again. They did an ultrasound. And that was when the second shock came, the one that made her press both hands over her mouth and close her eyes. Not one baby. 2. Twins. If you are new here and you have been reading this story from the beginning, this is the moment. Subscribe before you read the next chapter, because what is coming will shake you. The same community that mocked Chioma is about to get the most dramatic morning of their lives. Don't miss it. Chioma drove home slowly, both hands on the wheel, barely breathing. She did not tell Daniel that night. She sat with the secret like a woman sitting beside a sleeping lion, full of awe, full of fear, afraid that any movement would break the miracle. She told him on a Friday evening, after dinner, when the house was quiet. She placed the result on the table in front of him without saying a word. Daniel looked at it. Then he looked at her. Then he looked at it again. "Chioma, twins," she said softly. His face did something she had not seen it do in years. It crumpled, not with sadness, with the particular grief of a man who realizes how close he came to making the worst mistake of his life. He stood up from the table, walked around to her side, and held her, not the polite hug of a disconnected husband, a real hold, the kind that says, "I am sorry, and thank God, and forgive me," all at once. Chioma held him back. She cried, he cried. They stood in that kitchen for a long time, and the soup on the stove burnt slightly at the edges, and neither of them moved to fix it. But she made one request. "Do not tell Patricia. Do not tell your mother. Do not tell anyone in that family yet. Let me carry this quietly. When the time is right, God will announce it himself." Daniel agreed. And so Chioma carried her miracle in silence, moving through her days with a secret joy that she wore like a lining inside a plain coat, invisible from the outside, warm only she could feel. She did not know that God was already arranging the stage for the most dramatic announcement anyone in that community would ever witness. Patricia planned the party for 6 weeks. It was meant to be a Thanksgiving, a celebration of her sons, Kevin and Brian, who had been doing so well in their respective jobs. Patricia had rented a hall in the neighborhood, hired a caterer, ordered customized Proud Mother sachets in gold fabric, and sent printed invitation cards to every person of consequence in the community. The invitation read, "Join us as we celebrate the excellence of our sons, Kevin and Brian Okafor, young men of integrity, hard work, and God's blessing." She had shown the card to Chioma personally, dropping it on the kitchen counter with a particular kind of deliberateness. "You should come," Patricia said, her eyes scanning Chioma's body, still not visibly pregnant at 5 months because Chioma had been careful about what she wore. "It will be good for you to see what raising children looks like. Maybe it will inspire you." Chioma picked up the card, looked at it, and placed it back down. "I will try to make it," she said. The morning of the party, the compound was buzzing. Mama Daniel had put on her best Ankara, neighbors were dressed up. The hall was decorated with balloons and a large banner that read, "Celebrating Kevin and Brian, our pride and joy." Patricia arrived in a cream lace blouse and a wrapper so stiff it could stand alone. She was glowing. She greeted everyone with the energy of a woman who had been waiting her whole life for this specific moment. But Kevin and Brian were not there. They are coming from work, Patricia told everyone. They are responsible young men. They do not keep late nights. They will be here. 30 minutes passed. An hour. Patricia's phone rang. She stepped away from the table to answer. People watched her face change the way you watch weather change, slow at first, then all at once. The color drained, the smile froze. Her hand came up to her mouth. She hung up and stood very still in the middle of the hall. Patricia, her husband touched her shoulder. What happened? She turned to face the room full of people, all the neighbors, all the family members, all the people she had invited to celebrate her son's greatness, and what came out of her mouth was barely a whisper. They have been arrested. The room went silent. What? Mama Daniel stepped forward. Kevin and Brian. Patricia's voice broke completely. They were caught, both of them, stealing from the company. They had been taking money from their accounts for months. Their employer reported them this morning. The police... She stopped. She could not continue. The hall erupted, not in celebration, in chaos. People were on their phones, questions were flying, some were already walking out, suddenly remembering urgent ins they had to do elsewhere. The caterer stood awkwardly beside a table full of food that nobody was eating. The banner overhead, celebrating Kevin and Brian, our pride and joy, fluttered slightly from the ceiling fan, reading now like a cruel joke. Patricia sank into a chair. And then, at the precise moment when Patricia's world was collapsing, Chioma's water broke. It happened right there in the compound. Chioma had not gone to the party hall. She had stayed home, moving slowly through the house, feeling the weight of her belly that she had hidden under loose dresses and careful posture. She was 7 months along but carrying twins, and her body had decided today was the day. She felt the first sharp pain at exactly the time Patricia was receiving the phone call about her sons. She held the wall and called out for the neighbor's daughter, a 16-year-old named Grace, who was sweeping the compound, and said very calmly, "Grace, please call my husband. Tell him it is time." Grace looked at her stomach, really looked for the first time, and screamed. Within minutes, the compound was in a different kind of chaos. Daniel arrived from down the street running. Mama Daniel, who had been on her way back from the hall, came in through the gate to find her son helping Chioma to the car. And that was when she saw it, the full round belly of a woman very much with child. Mama Daniel stopped walking. "Chioma." "Mama, we have to go," Daniel said, his voice urgent and trembling with a happiness that even fear could not hide. They made it to the hospital. The neighbors who had gathered outside the compound heard the updates through phone calls and whispers that passed from ear to ear like electricity through a wire. Chioma is in labor. Chioma is at the hospital. Chioma has been pregnant. Can you believe it? She hid it. She carried it in secret. She said nothing to anyone. And then the final message which spread through that compound, through that street, through that entire community faster than anything else had ever spread before. Chioma delivered. Twins, a boy and a girl, both healthy. Mother is fine. The sound that went up from the people gathered outside the compound was something between a shout and a sob. Women who had whispered about her barrenness were now crying with joy. Men who had looked at Daniel with pity were calling to congratulate him. The same mouths that had called her empty were now saying God is faithful, and I always knew, and she was a good woman, that Chioma, she deserved this. Inside the hall, Patricia sat alone. The guests had gone, the food sat cold, the banner was being taken down. Her husband had left to deal with lawyers and phone calls and the urgent, ugly business of sons who had stolen and been caught. Patricia sat there in that empty hall, surrounded by deflated balloons and dirty plates, and she thought about all the things she had said, all the Sundays she had come to that compound and used her sons as weapons, all the time she had looked at Chioma's flat stomach and smiled. She sat there for a long time. At the hospital, Chioma held her son and her daughter, one in each arm, and looked at them with a quietness that was deeper than happiness. Daniel sat beside her, holding her hand, unable to stop the tears that kept coming. Mama Daniel came in last. She stood at the door of the hospital room for a moment, looking at the woman she had spent years reducing to a problem, to a failure, to a dry ground not worth watering. Chioma looked up and met her eyes. Mama Daniel walked to the bed. She sat down beside Chioma. She did not speak for a long time. Then, in a voice that was old and tired and honest in a way it had never been before, she said, "Forgive me." Just 2 words. Chioma looked at her mother-in-law, this woman who had made so many of her Sundays painful, who had spoken about her as though she were furniture, who had approved of bringing another woman into her home. And she did not feel rage. She did not feel triumph. She felt something quieter and more powerful than both. She felt free. "I forgave you a long time ago, Mama. I just needed God to finish what He started." Mama Daniel bowed her head. Outside the hospital window, the evening was coming down soft and orange over the city. Somewhere across town, Patricia was dealing with the ruin of everything she had built her pride on. And here, in this small room that smelled of antiseptic and new life, Chioma sat with her 2 babies and her weeping husband, and a mother-in-law who had finally run out of words. The same community that had counted her empty years like a curse was now counting her children as a miracle. The woman they had called Barren held a boy in one arm and a girl in the other, and she smiled. Not because she had won, but because God had not forgotten her, not for a single day, not for a single prayer, not for one tear she had ever cried on a cold bathroom floor in the dark. He had simply been preparing something too big to rush.